Hello and welcome to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg, and I'm here today for a very exciting task, which is to look at the long list for the Women's Prize for Fiction 2024. We already have the long list for the nonfiction prize, which I will link down below, my reaction to the long list for nonfiction. And that was a really interesting list. I am more of a fiction reader, however, so I have been really looking forward to this list. It's a very interesting list. More than half of it is debut authors. I believe it's more than half. Yeah, they say more than half is debut authors. So it feels like the jury for this year really was thinking about the prize as a way of helping to discover a new author. That is always really interesting. I love prize lists and things like that as tools of discovery, and there are definitely a lot of books on this list that I had not heard of, so it would be fun to run through them with you here. There are definitely some known authors on this list and people who have been in the mix for the Women's Prize before. I believe Kate Grenville has won the Women's Prize before, back when it was called the Orange Prize, and Anne Enright has been in the mix. I want to say this is the 5th time that she has been on the long list, and she has been on a short list, I think, 2 times before, maybe 3. So there are definitely some known people and people who have been in the mix for this prize in particular before. But most of these people are debut authors and definitely less known. I shudder to think what has happened to people who made predictions for this. I took a pass on that. I'm holding out for the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction. I'll be putting my predictions for that out later this month. That's where I always do my predictions, but you know, we will start running through the books on the long list. Before we do, I just want to mention timing and dates. So we will be getting the shortlist for the fiction prize on April 24th, and the winner will be announced on June 13th. The nonfiction prize will be announcing its shortlist later this month, with March 27th. And the winner will be also announced on June 13th. So those are your important dates to remember. Now, just a note before we start running through these, because I feel like every time I do this, someone gets really angry. Usually multiple people get really angry and leave comments saying, "How dare you review books that you haven't actually read?" These are not reviews. What I am doing here is looking at the long list. And for the books that I'm unfamiliar with, I'm just talking about whether or not I find them interesting and would like to read them. Again, I like to use a long list as a tool of discovery to help me find books that I might be interested in. And since this book list is made of more than half debut authors, and a lot of it are authors and books that I was less familiar with, that is exactly what it's doing for me. So I'm looking forward to going through this list and finding books that I might want to read. I'm not reviewing them. It's all okay. Everybody's fine. So let's begin going through the 16 books on this list. The first one is Hangman by Maya Binyam. This one I am familiar with. I haven't heard a whole lot about it. However, it has popped up on my radar for the Pulitzer Prize. I actually will be talking about it when I do my Pulitzer Prize predictions. I think it's a long shot for the Pulitzer Prize for fiction, but it's going to be on my predictions for that. So it was really interesting for me to see it pop up here. Here is what they say about it. An existential journey, a tragic farce, a slapstick tragedy, a shockingly original debut novel about exile, diaspora, and the search for Black refuge. A man returns home to sub-Saharan Africa after 26 years living in exile in America. When he arrives, he finds that he doesn't recognize the country or anyone in it. Thankfully, someone at the airport knows him, a man who calls him brother. As they travel to this man's house, the purpose of his visit comes into focus. He is here to find his real brother, who is dying. Hangman is a tragicomic journey through homecoming and loss. It is a hilarious and twisted odyssey, peopled by phantoms and tricksters, aid workers and taxi drivers, the relatives and riddles that lead this man along a circuitous path towards the truth. This is the strangely honest story of one man's search for refuge in this world and the one that lies beyond it. It sounds like a really interesting book. Again, it has been on my radar since, I want to say November is when I first came across this book and started kind of thinking about it as a spoiler for the Pulitzer Prize for fiction. But I haven't sought it out. And I don't think I'm likely to do that anytime soon. You know, my reading is pretty stacked for the first half of 2024 because this month I'm reading Irish authors before I go to Ireland. April, I have to catch up on a bunch of other things. And then in May, I will be in Ireland and Scotland. So I'm not anticipating that I'll be getting a lot of reading done. And then in June, I do Pride Month reading. So even if I decide to read Hangman, it will be after this prize has already been announced, which is kind of an interesting position because then I would know if it wins or even if it makes the shortlist. So that's kind of the way this is looking right now. I'm interested, but not in a rush. And if you have read Hangman and you think I should prioritize this book, let me know in the comment section down below. In the meantime, we are going to move on to the next book on the list, which is In Defense of the Act by Effie Black. By the way, I should have mentioned this in the beginning. I will have affiliate links to all of the books that either are available in the United States or will be available in the United States in the description box down below. If you use those affiliate links, I get a little kickback from Bookshop. Otherwise, you can order these books at your local independent bookstore. You can also request them at your library. But a pretty handy reference to which ones are available in the United States or which ones are coming in the United States is to look in that description box down below and see which ones have affiliate links to bookshop.org. Hangman is one of them, and this one is not. In Defense of the Act is not currently available in the United States. Maybe the fact that it is now on the long list for the Women's Prize will make it get a release date over here. I did also get a comment recently from someone who said something about, I mentioned that a book was not available in the United States, and they say, well, Amazon says it's available. Well, okay, it's a weird thing that Amazon does. They don't want you to know that you're ordering from the UK because Amazon owns a distribution company in the UK. So basically, they make it look like the book is available because they don't want you to know that you're ordering it from the UK. And I don't shop on Amazon, so I don't usually run into that trick. But just FYI, it's a thing that they do. Anyway, In Defense of the Act by Effie Black. In Defense of the Act tells the story of Jessica Miller, a suicide researcher who secretly believes suicide might actually be a good thing until something happens that makes her question everything. Jessica holds opinions that might initially shock some readers, viewing the world via a detached scientific lens. But through Jessica's sometimes surprisingly funny narration, Effie Black is able to confront the difficult topic of suicide head-on, while weaving in themes of grief and trauma, forgiveness and resilience, and exploring what it means to be a queer member of a family. The book navigates the relationships between the protagonist and the women in her life, looking from the female perspective at what it means to be a friend, a lover, and a carer. This definitely sounds like a book that is walking a very thin tightrope because that is a topic that is a trigger point for a lot of people. There are a lot of personal feelings that get attached to it, and people can be very triggered by it. And, you know, there are also, it can be a very volatile subject as well. Lots of tricky things to navigate with it. So I am a little bit intrigued, I confess, but this is something where I would definitely wait to see what other people say about it. I'm particularly intrigued by the mention of what it means to be a queer member of a family. I don't know if you could see my ears perk up when I got to that part of the description, but even if you didn't see it, internally, that's kind of what was happening in my soul. So I am curious about In Defense of the Act by Effie Black, pending feedback from other people. So if you've read this book, let me know what you thought of it in the comment section down below. Definitely feels like it is just destined to be a bit of a cilantro book, something people love or hate, because again, I feel like the topic itself will sort of lend to either or end of that equation. So again, if you've read it, let me know what you thought of it in the comment section down below. In the meantime, we'll move on to the next book, which was And Then She Fell by Alicia Elliott. On the surface, Alice is exactly where she should be in life. She's just given birth to a beautiful baby girl, Dawn. Her ever-charming husband, Steve, a white academic whose area of study is conveniently her own Mohawk culture, is nothing but supportive, and they've moved into a new home in a wealthy neighborhood in Toronto, a generous gift from her in-laws. But Alice could not feel more like an imposter. She isn't bonding with Dawn, a struggle made more difficult by the recent loss of her own mother. Every waking moment is spent hiding her despair from Steve and their picture-perfect neighbors, among whom she's the sole Indigenous resident. Her perpetual self-doubt hinders the one vestige of her old life she has left. Writing a modern retelling of the I'm not going to attempt to pronounce this Indigenous word because I would get it wrong. I apologize, but it's a creation story. Alice finds herself hearing voices she can't explain and speaking with things that should not be talking to her, all while her neighbor's passive aggression begins to morph into something far more threatening. Though Steve urges her this is all in her head, Alice suspects something is very, very wrong and that her creation story holds the key to her and Dawn's survival. She just has to finish it before it's too late. That sounds fascinating, the idea of an Indigenous person existing in white spaces and what that feels like is a story that I would be extremely interested in. The fact that it sort of plays with thriller tropes, I don't know. How hard does it lean in that direction? Because, again, this is something I haven't read. Clearly, the Women's Prize jury is a fan. If you've read this, let me know what you thought of it in the comment section down below. It sounds intriguing, but again, we're running into a situation where I feel like I would want to hear how other people have experienced this book before I would commit to whether or not I would read it. But my interest is piqued, and that seems to be a bit of a theme with this list so far. And then we have The Wren by Anne Enright, which feels like the jury kind of throwing shade in my direction for not putting Anne Enright on my pile of possibilities for the month of March, for the month of March, not Arch, because Anne Enright is Irish, and I haven't read one of her books, and I actually really thought about including her on my pile of possibilities, but I was also trying to think of things that I immediately had access to, and that is actually what led me to not include Anne Enright. And here's the Women's Prize saying, "You fool," to me. Maybe I'll try to squeeze her in this month if there's time. Here's what they say about The Wren. Nell, funny, brave, and so much loved, is a young woman with adventure on her mind. As she sets out into the world, she finds her family history hard to escape. For her mother, Carmel, Nell's leaving home opens a space in her heart where the turmoil of a lifetime begins to churn. And across the generations falls the long shadow of Carmel's famous father, an Irish poet of beautiful words and brutal actions. This is a meditation on love, spiritual, romantic, darkly sexual, or genetic. A generational saga that traces the inheritance not just of trauma, but also of wonder. It is a testament to the glorious resilience of women in the face of promises false and true. Above all, it is an exploration of the love between mother and daughter, sometimes fierce, often painful, but always transcendent. All right, you got me, Women's Prize. I feel like I'm going to need to see if I can get a copy of this book, and maybe I'll try to squeeze it in the month of March, because I really have heard a lot of great things about Anne Enright over the years. She is a Booker winner for, I think, the Gathering, and I have not read any of her work before, but I hear consistently good things, and I have heard a lot of good things about The Wren. So maybe I'll just see what my local library has. I don't think there were any audiobooks that were available, so maybe I'll just check my local library and see what's available. If it's The Wren, great, but I feel like I just got an addition to my Irish pile of possibilities for the month of March. I'll put a link to that video down below if you are curious about what else is on my pile of possibilities for the month of March. But I think Anne Enright just got a spot on there. Thanks to the Women's Prize for giving me more to try to cram in. Now we go to The Maiden by Kate Foster. Edinburgh, October 1679. Christian Nimmo is arrested and charged with the murder of her lover, James Forrester. News of her imprisonment and subsequent trial is splashed across the broadsides with headlines that leave little room for doubt. Adulteress, whore, murderess. Only a year before, Lady Christian was leading a life of privilege and respectability, so what led her to risk everything for an affair? And does that make her guilty of murder? She wasn't the only woman in Forrester's life, and certainly not the only one who might have had cause to wish him dead. Inspired by a real-life case, The Maiden gives voice to women otherwise silenced by history. Told through chapters narrated alternately by Christian and Violet, the prostitute Forrester kept as a mistress, it's a remarkable story. That sounds fascinating. And unfortunately, I believe this is one of the ones that is not available in the United States at this moment. It is not. So, I mean, the way the world works right now, it is very possible to order from the UK. And usually I like trying to find independent stores in the UK, typically Gaze the Word or Queerlit. This doesn't seem like it would be in their wheelhouse. So there's always Blackwell's as well. And usually you can get books cheap from there. I don't really want to purchase right now, so I feel like I'm going to have to wait. But that does immediately grab my attention and sound like something that I would really like to read. So I'm going to leave this tab open so I can circle back and try to figure out if there's a way I can read this book without, seeking it out or like ordering it from overseas, which is not a difficult thing to do, but we'll see. And if you've read it, let me know what you thought of it in the comment section down below. But that description immediately grabbed my attention. It sounds like it flirts with mystery thriller conventions or true crime conventions, but in a way that I would find really interesting. So we'll see how that goes. Now we have Brotherless Night by Vivi Ganeshanathan. And 16-year-old Sashi wants to become a doctor, but over the next decade, as a vicious civil war subsumes Sri Lanka, her dream takes on a different path as she watches those around her, including her 4 beloved brothers and their best friend, get swept up in violent political ideologies and their consequences. She must ask herself, is it possible for anyone to move through life without doing harm? This did sound really interesting to me when it was originally released in the United States, which was at some point in 2023. And I didn't read it, and I was trying to keep it in the back of my mind. I know I've never talked about it on my channel before, but I was trying to keep it back of mind, and things just kept getting in the way. End result, I have not read it, and I don't think I'm going to immediately run out and get a copy. Again, I feel like unless something really, really grabs my attention, the odds that I'll be able to fit it in before the second half of 2024 are pretty slim. So I am really intrigued by this book, but I feel like it's going to have to wait. And it's probably going to be after the Women's Prize is announced. So if you've read this, let me know what you thought of it in the comment section down below. But I feel like it's probably going to end up waiting. Whereas the Maiden, if there was a copy available to me right now, I might try to squeeze that in the month of April. I'm just trying not to do a lot of damage to myself in the month of April, since that's the 1 month before July when I'm not going to have a theme going on or a vacation right in the middle of it. The next book is Restless Dolly Maunder by Kate Grenville. And Kate Grenville, I believe, is the one who has previously won the Women's Prize. Dolly Maunder is born at the end of the 19th century, when society's long-locked doors are just starting to creak ajar for determined women. Growing up in a poor farming family in rural New South Wales, Dolly spends her life doggedly pushing at those doors. A husband and 2 children do not deter her from searching for love and independence. Restless Dolly Maunder is a subversive, triumphant tale of a pioneering woman working her way through a world of limits and obstacles, who is able, despite the cost, to make a life she could call her own. I have heard of Kate Grenville and have heard consistently good things about her as well. Not as much as Anne Enright, but that does sound like a really fascinating book based on that description of it. I'm double checking my list to see if that was one of the ones that is currently available in the United States. And it looks like it is. So I'm going to leave this tab open and I'm going to see if my library has a copy. I had not heard of this book before, so I don't know if there are audio editions out anywhere. I believe Kate Grenville is Irish. So that actually gives me a little bit of leeway because I could add it to my pile of possibilities for March, or I could try to do it in April, or I could even try to do it in May when I go to Ireland. So this could be a possibility that I might try to squeeze in. So let me know what you thought of it if you've read it. But I think I'm intrigued by that for sure. Now we have Enter Ghost by Isabella Hamad. After years away from her family's homeland and reeling from a disastrous love affair, actress Sonia Nasir returns to Haifa to visit her older sister Hanin. While Hanin made a life here commuting to Tel Aviv to teach at the university, Sonia remained in London to focus on her acting career and now dissolute marriage. On her return, she finds her relationship to Palestine is fragile, both bone-deep and new. When Sonia meets the charismatic and candid Mariam, a local director, she joins a production of Hamlet in the West Bank. Soon, Sonia is rehearsing Gertrude's lines in classical Arabic with a dedicated group of men who, in spite of competing egos and priorities, all want to bring Shakespeare to that side of the wall. As opening night draws closer and the warring intensifies, it becomes clear just how many obstacles stand before the troupe. Amidst it all, the life Sonia once knew starts to give way to the daunting, exhilarating possibility of finding a new self in her ancestral home. Timely, thoughtful, and passionate, Isabella Hamad's highly anticipated second novel is an exquisite story of the connection to be found in family and shared resistance. That does sound really interesting. It sounds, unfortunately, extremely politically timely, which could be enough to propel it onto the shortlist or even to the win if this book does sound really interesting. So if it is as good as it sounds, then, this could be a shoo-in for the shortlist. People don't like hearing that outside political circumstances can come into book awards, movie awards, all of that stuff. But, the world is an imperfect place. What can I say? So all of that to say, I think this book probably has a really good shot at the shortlist. I don't think I'm going to seek it out or prioritize it right now, but I would love to hear what your experience of it is if you have read it. So let me know in the comment section down below, and we will move on to the next book. In the meantime, that is Soldier Sailor by Claire Kilroy. And I believe this is one that is coming soon in the United States. In her acclaimed new novel, Claire Kilroy creates an unforgettable heroine whose fierce love for her young son clashes with the seismic change to her own identity. As her marriage strains and she struggles with questions of autonomy, creativity, and the passing of time, an old friend makes a welcome return. But can he really offer her a lifeline to the woman she used to be? Sounds interesting. I feel like I want a little bit more about the book than just that little tease. So if you've read this, let me know what you thought of it in the comment section down below. I think it sounds interesting, but I feel like I want a little more than just that tease to decide if I'm really going to try to fit it in before they announce a winner for this prize. Now we have 8 Lives of a Century-Old Trickster by Mireille Lee. At the Golden Sunset Retirement Home, it is not unusual for residents to invent stories. So when elderly Ms. Mook first begins to unspool her memories, the obituarist listening to her is skeptical. Stories of captivity, friendship, murder, adventure, assumed identities, and spying. Stories that take place in World War II Indonesia, in Seoul during the Korean War, in Cold War Pyongyang, in China. The stories are so colorful and various, at times so unbelievable, that they cannot surely all belong to the same woman. Can they? As playful and thought-provoking as it is compelling, as brutal and harrowing as it is achingly poignant and tender, this is a novel about love and war, deceit and betrayal, about identity, storytelling, and the trickery required for survival. That sounds interesting. Doesn't sound like something I would try to prioritize right now. But, I will say there isn't anything on this list so far, at least, that has immediately made me say, ooh, I'm not interested in that one at all. Everything sounds interesting. I feel like a case could be made for every single book so far to get me to read it. It's just a matter of whether or not I would try to read it in the first half of 2024 or wait until the second half. That's kind of the struggle that I'm facing right now. Now we have The Blue Beautiful World by Karen Lord. The world is changing and humanity must change with it. Rising seas and soaring temperatures have radically transformed the face of Earth. Meanwhile, Earth is being observed from afar by other civilizations, and now they are ready to make contact. I may have spoken too soon, because if there's one thing that will immediately sort of turn off my interest, it could ghosts for one, or aliens. So let's see where the rest of this description goes, but, my interest may have just with that. Let's see. Vying to prepare humanity for first contact are a group of dreamers and changemakers, including Peter Hendricks, the genius inventor behind the most advanced VR tech, Carissa, a beloved celebrity icon with a passion for humanitarian work, and Kanoa, a member of a global council of young people drafted to reimagine the relationship between humankind and alien societies. And they may have an unexpected secret weapon. Owen, a pop megastar whose ability to connect with his adoring fans is more than charisma. His hidden talent could be the key to uniting Earth as it looks toward the stars. I am not feeling into this at all. A pop megastar who could be the key to uniting Earth, like a pop star. I don't know. I don't want to disparage this book, but I don't feel interested in this at all based on this description. There's one more paragraph. Let's see. But Owen's abilities are so unique that no one can control him, and so seductive that he cannot help but use them. Can he transcend his human limitations and find the freedom he has always dreamed of? Or is he doomed to become the dictator of his nightmares? If I'm wrong, let me know in the comment section down below, but I shouldn't have said anything because I doomed myself. I doomed myself by saying that this was full of books that were interesting, because that one immediately does not seem like anything I would want to read. But again, if you've read it and think I'm wrong, let me know in the comment section down below. Now we have a very familiar book, Western Lane by Chetna Maru. This book was on the shortlist for the Booker Prize last year, so I'm willing to bet a lot of you have read it. And I was actually interested in reading it, but I have not done so yet. And I will put a link to my Booker shortlist reaction down below if you want to go back in time and see that. But yeah, it's a book that sounded really interesting. It was a bit of a mixed response as it headed toward the Booker announcement. But by and large, I think people tended to like it, and it did sound really interesting to me. Anyway, here's what the blurb says. 11-year-old Gopi has been playing squash since she was old enough to hold a racket. When her mother dies, her father enlists her in a quietly brutal training regimen, and the game becomes her world. Slowly, she grows apart from her sisters. Her life is reduced to the sport, guided by its rhythms, the serve, the volley, the drive, the shot, and its echo. But on the court, she is not alone. She is with her pa. She is with Ged, a 13-year-old boy with his own formidable talent. She is with the players who have come before her. She is in awe. An unforgettable coming-of-age story, Chetna Maru's first novel is a moving exploration of the closeness of sisterhood, the immigrant experience, and the collective overcoming of grief. I am glad that the Women's Prize brought that back onto my radar, because it is something that I was interested in reading last year, and then in the crush of, end-of-year stuff, it fell off my radar again, so I'm glad to have it back. And maybe this time I'll get around to reading it. Now we have Night Bloom by Peace Adzo Medea. I believe this is an author who was in Reese's book club for her debut novel, and this is the follow-up. I haven't read either one of them, but here's what they say. Selassie and Akorfa are cousins, born on the same day in 1985. Growing up in a small Ghanaian town, they share everything. Whispered late-night conversations, dreams for the future, secrets. But as they enter their teens, Selassie begins to change, constructing a wall around herself to keep everyone away. Soon, Akorfa no longer recognizes her sad, withdrawn friend. It will take many years for their paths to cross again. Akorfa now works in international development as she navigates the challenges of life as a black woman and mother in the U.S. Selassie has finally made it as a successful restaurateur running the hottest spot in Accra. When one of Selassie's staff is threatened by a corrupt government minister, she and Akorfa must overcome their differences and face the truth of what happened all those years ago to stop the past from repeating itself. Night Bloom takes a keen-eyed look at family, class, and discrimination in Ghana and the U.S. in this irresistible story of female friendship, the relationships that shape us, and the people we never quite leave behind. That does sound interesting, doesn't immediately grab my attention and sound like anything I would need to prioritize, but I'm not immediately dismissive of it like I was with. Let's just not talk about that one. And move on to the next. Ordinary Human Failings by Megan Nolan. It's 1990 in London, and Tom Hargreaves has it all. A burgeoning career as a reporter, fierce ambition, and a brisk disregard for the peasants. Ordinary people, his readers, easy tabloid fodder. His star looks set to rise when he stumbles across a scoop. A dead child on a London estate, grieving parents loved across the neighborhood, and the finger of suspicion pointing at one reclusive family of Irish immigrants and bad apples, the Greens. At their heart sits Carmel, beautiful, otherworldly, broken, and once destined for a future beyond her circumstances until life and love got in her way. Crushed by failure and surrounded by disappointment, there's nowhere for her to go and no chance of escape. Now, with the police closing in on a suspect and the tabloids hunting their monster, she must confront the secrets and silences that have trapped her family for so many generations. It sounds interesting. Again, I feel like I would want to know how much it leans into those sort of thriller tropes. The fact that it's on the Women's Prize Longlist makes me think that it's definitely more literary than thriller, but that would hold me away, at least until the second half of 2024. And if you have read it and think I should reconsider, let me know. But it does sound interesting. So far, we only have one dud on this list, for me, in my opinion. But there are 2 books left, so let's see how that goes. River East, River West by Aubrey Lescure is next. A mesmerizing reversal of the East-West immigrant narrative set against China's economic boom, River East, River West is a deeply moving exploration of race, identity, and family, of capitalism's false promise and private dreams. Shanghai, 2007. Feeling betrayed by her American mother's engagement to their rich landlord Lu Fang, 14-year-old Alva begins plotting her escape. But the exclusive American school, a potential ticket out, is not what she imagined. Qingdao, 1985. Newlywed Lu Fang works as a lowly shipping clerk. Though he aspires to a bright future, he is one of many casualties of harsh political reforms. Then China opens up to foreigners in capital, and Lu Fang meets a woman who makes him question what he should settle for. Again, it sounds interesting, but I feel like I would want a little bit more about it. So if you've read it, let me know what you thought of it in the comments down below. But this is another one of those books that sounds interesting, but not like anything that I would immediately prioritize. So still, heading into the last book, there's only one dud on this list, in my opinion. A Trace of Sun by Pam Williams is the final book. Let's see if it holds up. Rafe is left behind in Granada when his mother, Scylla, follows her husband to England in search of a better life. When they are finally reunited 7 years later, they are strangers, and the emotional impact of the separation leads to events that rip their family apart. As they try to move forward with their lives, his mother's secret will make Rafe question all he's ever known of who he is. You know I love a complicated family story. That does sound interesting, but it does sound like a sort of familiar story. Like, I feel like I would want to know if it's the sort of cliched expected version of that story, or if it's bringing anything new. And maybe it is. I'm still interested. I wouldn't call it a dud, but it sounds familiar, is what I'll say. You know, the whole thing about family, separation, and then, you know, questioning who you are with a new revelation, that seems familiar, maybe a little too familiar. And it's popped up a little bit in some of the other descriptions, but always with a bit of a twist. This feels like a very straightforward version of that story. So could be interesting, but not something I would prioritize. So let me know what you have thought of A Trace of Sun if you have read it. In the meantime, I think it's interesting, but it's not something I would immediately run out to do. So only one dud, according to me, and that was The Blue Beautiful World by Karen Lord. There are definitely some interesting books. I've thought about reading Hangman, so that kind of jumped out to me for sure. I am probably going to try to seek out a copy of The Maiden. We'll see. I don't really know yet. Restless Dolly Maunder sounded really interesting, and that one is available in the United States, or coming, so there's that one. And Wright definitely jumped up to my pile of possibilities for the month of March as well. And I had wanted to read Western Lane already. So those are the ones that most immediately jump out to me. I would love to hear what most immediately jumps out to you. Let me know in the comment section down below. Are you shocked by anything that was omitted? Let me know. Somebody had recently commented that they hope Tom Lake by Ann Patchett makes it onto the list. And as soon as they said that, I was like, oh, yes, I would love to see that book there. And obviously that didn't happen. But if you have any omissions that you would like to shout out, let me know in the comment section down below. If there are any books that you would like to see make the shortlist, let me know. And if there's any one book that you immediately want to get behind and say you would like to see that book win, let me know that as well. As always, I really appreciate your time, and I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.